The 2010s were one of the wildest decades in NBA history. Dynasties were built, records were shattered, and super teams reshaped the league. But for every LeBron and Steph and KD, there were other stars. Players who, for a moment, looked like the future of the NBA, who had MVP caliber seasons, who gave us unforgettable moments, only to vanish from the spotlight almost instantly. These are those forgotten stars of the 2010s, players who rose to the spotlight but faded almost right after. Isaiah Thomas was never supposed to make it to the NBA. At just 5'9", he was the 60th pick in his draft, the very last name called. Analysts said he was too small or he was too limited, a career backup at best. Sacramento took a chance on him, but no one expected much, and for the first 4 years, Isaiah bounced around the league just waiting for his shots. And then in 2015, everything changed. The Boston Celtics, stuck in a rebuild and desperate for a spark, sent a first-round pick to bring him in. And from the moment Isaiah put on that green and white, everything clicked. You see, in Boston, he found something rare, a franchise that actually believed in him, and he gave them everything in return. That first year, he averaged 22 points a night and became an instant all-star. The city of Boston loved him, and he loved Boston right back. By 2017, Isaiah was already the face of the franchise. That season, he led the Celtics to 53 wins and somehow turned Boston into the first seed out east. I mean, this was a guy the league thought wouldn't even last, suddenly becoming a legitimate MVP candidate. But it was the fourth quarter of games where he truly left his mark. Isaiah averaged 9.8 points in the final frame that season, and for a 15-game stretch, he bumped that up to 14. Night after night, 18,000 fans packed TD Garden, living and dying with his every shot. A guard taken dead last had turned himself into the beating heart of Boston basketball. But when the playoffs came around that season, disaster struck.
Tragic news affecting Boston Celtics star Isaiah Thomas. His sister was killed in a one-car accident early Saturday morning, according to Washington State Police. China Thomas died at the scene on Interstate 5 in Federal Way. She was 22 years old. No word on the cause of the crash.
Man, I'm just taking it day by day. Some days are better than others, but I'm not here, man. Like, it's never gonna be the same. So.
Isaiah's younger sister, China, died in a car accident, and while most players would have stepped away, Isaiah didn't. Game 1 ended in heartbreak against the Wizards, but Game 2 was a completely different story. On his sister's late birthday, Isaiah gave the game everything he had. With 53 points, it was one of the greatest performances we had ever seen. For one night, Isaiah wasn't just a Celtic, he was the symbol of everything Boston loves about basketball. And after everything, the tragedy, the heroics, the MVP chance, IT should have been untouchable. But the NBA doesn't always do fairy tale endings. Late in that playoff run, he injured his hip, and even though he played through the pain, Danny Ainge made the call anyways. And just a few months later, Boston's hero was shipped off to Cleveland in exchange for Kyrie Irving. One day he was the face of the franchise, and the next he was gone. Now, Isaiah tried to play through the pain for the Cavs, but he just wasn't the same. And over the next 5 years, he played for 7 different teams, never averaging more than 12 points per game. He went from an MVP candidate to a journeyman fighting for 10-day contracts. And yet, here's the thing about Isaiah Thomas. His name might have faded from NBA conversations, but in Boston, that man is immortal. He gave them everything, and for one magical season, he was carrying an entire city's hopes on his shoulders. Now, he might never make the Hall of Fame, he might not even get his jersey retired, but in 2017, for one season and for one city, he was everything. Back in 2011, there wasn't a more exciting player in basketball than Blake Griffin. Every single night, Lob City felt like a highlight reel waiting to happen, and if you were watching in the NBA back then, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But Blake's rise started way before all of those dunks. The Clippers drafted him first overall, hoping he'd finally save a franchise that had been a punchline for decades. And in typical Clippers fashion, he broke his kneecap before playing a single game, missing his entire rookie season. But when he finally stepped onto the floor in 2010, Blake Griffin didn't just live up to the hype, he blew straight past it. That first year, he averaged 22 and 12, won Rookie of the Year, and gave us one of the most iconic dunk contests fast in NBA history. And then came Chris Paul, the man who took his career to a whole nother level. In December of 2011, the Clippers traded for CP3, and just like that, Lob City was born. They were flying through the air, catching lobs nobody else could even attempt, and for a couple of years, they actually felt unstoppable. But here's the thing about Lob City, as fun as it was, it never reached the mountaintop. They were flashy and they were entertaining, but when the playoffs came around, they just couldn't finish the job. They'd blow big leads, collapse in game 7s, and fight each other almost as much as they fought the other team. And for Blake Griffin, the injuries started to add up. You see, those dunks that made him a superstar, they also took a toll on his body. Whether it was his hamstrings, knees, quads, you name it, Blake hurt it. In 2017, he signed a 5-year extension to stay in Los Angeles, and the Clippers even made a whole ceremony about it, pitching him as the face of the franchise for life. But just 6 months later, they traded him to Detroit. Now, to Blake's credit, for a little while, he reinvented himself. In 2019, he averaged 24, 7, and 5 while earning All-NBA honors and dragged the Pistons to the playoffs on one good leg. But after that, it just never came back. The injuries piled up, his explosion disappeared, and suddenly, a guy who used to jump over 7-footers was shooting spot-up threes. But at his peak, Blake Griffin was the definition of box office. He turned the Clippers into the biggest show in basketball, and even though the championships never came, Lob City gave us moments NBA fans will talk about forever. And now he's one of those names we don't bring up anymore, but if you were around during the Lob City era, you remember. Blake Griffin made the Clippers matter in a way that they never had before. There was a point in time when Demarcus Cousins was one of the most dominant players on this planet. And if you didn't watch him back then, it's hard to explain just how unstoppable Boogie really was. He had the footwork of a guard, the touch of a shooter, the strength of a linebacker, and the mean stare of someone who wanted to put you through the floor. On any given night, you could pencil him in for 28 and 12 like it was nothing, and the craziest part, he was doing all of this on some truly awful Kings teams. I'm talking different coaches every season, a front office that couldn't get out of its own way, and constant roster turnover. And yet somehow, Boogie was still out there giving you all NBA numbers every single night. From 2014 to 2017, he averaged 27 and 11, made back-to-back All-Star teams. The man should have been a perennial MVP candidate. But Sacramento could just never figure it out. By the end of 2017, Cousins was fed up, and that's when the Kings traded him to the Pelicans. He got paired up with Anthony Davis to form one of the most terrifying front courts the league had ever seen. And for a little while, it actually worked. The Twin Towers were bullying everyone, and it felt like Cousins had finally found a situation where he could actually win. But just like that, it all fell apart. It was January 26, and Cousins was having one of the best games of his life, already locking up a triple-double. A loose ball goes up, and he goes after it, tearing his Achilles in the process. And that was the moment that changed everything for his career, because he never got that same explosion back, and in the NBA, that was everything. A year later, Boogie signed a 1-year deal with the Warriors, where he hoped he could rehab his value and chase a ring at the same time. But even there, he tore his quad in the playoffs, and after that, his downfall truly began. Cousins bounced around the league from the Lakers to the Nuggets and the Bucks, but nothing ever stuck. Flashes of the old Boogie would pop up every now and then, but he never got close to the player he once was. And that's what makes his story one of the biggest what-ifs of the entire 2010s. At his peak, he was unstoppable, a walking 30 and 15 who could take over a game whenever he wanted. But the injuries, the dysfunction in Sacramento, and just plain bad timing kept him from ever getting a shot at the greatness he deserved. One night, Boogie was the most dominant big man in the NBA, and then the next, he was fighting to stay on a roster. Now, there was a time when John Wall was supposed to be that guy, the face of the next generation. The Wizards drafted him first overall, and from the moment he stepped onto an NBA floor, you just knew this dude was different. Because John Wall wasn't just quick, he was the fastest player in the league. I mean, seriously, nobody could stay in front of him. He'd grab a rebound, take 3 dribbles, and suddenly he was at the rim before the defense even turned around. He had an extra gear that nobody else had. And for a while, it felt like the Wizards had finally found their savior. By his fourth season, Wall was an all-star, running pick and rolls with Gortat, throwing insane lobs, and creating one of the nastiest backcourts in the league with Bradley Beal. And then came the peak of it all in 2017. That year, Wall averaged 23-11, led Washington to 49 wins, and took the Celtics to 7 games in the second round. And in Game 6 of that series, Wall hit the biggest shot of his career. It was a clutch game-winning 3 at the buzzer that was supposed to be the start of something special, but that was the highest that he would ever get. The Wizards never made it past the second round with Wall, and as the years went on, the injuries started stacking up. First it was his knees, then his ankles, then his heel, and in 2019, the Achilles tear. But not only did he tear it, he did it at home, slipping on the stairs while recovering from a previous surgery. And that one injury alone costed him almost 2 full seasons. By the time Wall came back, the league had moved on. He got traded to Houston in the Westbrook deal and barely saw the floor. After that, there were brief stints with the Clippers and a few other teams, but he was never the same John Wall. At his peak, he was one of the most electrifying players in the NBA, but he never got the deep playoff run, the hardware, and now he's just one of those names people stop talking about. But for Wizards fans, they'll never forget what it felt like to watch him at his best. And like a lot of guys from this era, his prime was here and then it was gone, just like that. LaMarcus Aldridge was never the loudest guy in the room. He wasn't flashy, he didn't talk trash, but if you watched him play, you knew exactly how good he was. Drafted 2nd overall, he started his career in Portland, and for almost a decade, he was the engine that kept the Blazers relevant. He had one of the smoothest mid-range games you'll ever see. That little turnaround fadeaway from the block was automatic. There wasn't a defender in the league who could stop it. And he wasn't just scoring, he was putting up 23 and 10 every night while quietly racking up all-star nods and all-NBA selections. But because he wasn't out there throwing down posters like Blake Griffin or talking trash like Draymond, he never got the same attention. In 2014, Damian Lillard arrived, and for a little while, it felt like Portland was building something special. But that team never made a deep playoff run, and by 2015, Aldridge made a huge decision, leaving the Blazers in free agency to join the Spurs. In San Antonio, he was supposed to help carry on the Spurs dynasty alongside Kawhi Leonard, and for a bit, it worked. He made multiple All-Star teams, became their go-to center, and even dropped 56 points in one game, the highest of his entire career. But as the Spurs declined and Kawhi forced his way out, Aldridge's role slowly faded. And just when it seemed like he had one more shot at a ring, life threw him a curveball nobody saw coming. In 2021, after signing with the Brooklyn Nets, Aldridge suddenly announced his retirement because of an irregular heartbeat. One day, he was preparing to make a championship run with Kevin Durant, and the next, his career was over. Now, he did come back briefly the following season, but it was never the same. And by 2023, LaMarcus Aldridge walked away from the NBA, this time for good. Now, he was never the most popular player, but if you know ball, you know how good he really was. 7 All-Star selections, 5 All-NBA teams, over 20,000 points, and one of the smoothest and most skilled scoring big man of his generation. LaMarcus Aldridge was a problem, and anyone who watched him in his prime knows exactly what he meant to the game. The 2010s were one of the wildest decades in NBA history, but for every superstar who defined the era, there were players like Isaiah Thomas, Blake Griffin, Demarcus Cousins, John Wall, and LaMarcus Aldridge. Players who had cities chanting their names, dropping MVP-level numbers, and giving us moments we'll never forget. Isaiah Thomas was the heartbeat of Boston until a hip injury and a trade flipped his career upside down. Blake Griffin turned the Clippers into the biggest show in basketball before his body betrayed him. Demarcus Cousins was on track to be the most dominant big man of his generation until one tear ended it all. John Wall was built to be a superstar, but his speed disappeared before he ever got his shot at greatness. And LaMarcus Aldridge was one of the smoothest scorers of his era, forced to walk away before he was ready. 5 different players with 5 different paths, but the same reminder of NBA stardom doesn't last forever. These guys may not have the rings, they may not be on the GOAT list, but for those few seasons when they had it going, they were everything. And if you were watching back then, you know exactly what I'm talking about.